Another week has gone by, and again Promise Christian Live is on the air. Time sure does fly, doesn't it? So do you have time enough to do all the things you need or want to do? It's an old cliche, but it works. Never put off until tomorrow what you can do today. You'll be surprised at how much you'll get done when you do that. And as for today, Mike has for you a very special guest. Mike, who do we have today?
Well, thank you, Dudley. We're so delighted again to be on the air with you today at Promise Christian Live. And, you know, I'm excited about our guest today. And just as I begin to introduce him, I'd like to have a scripture here to read to you that really reminds me of his life of commitment and faithfulness in the ministry. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, "Moreover, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful." And I believe our guest has been that today, Chaplain Brigadier General Stephen Kirtley. And Steve, welcome to the program today.
Good morning.
It's good to see you, General. How are you today, sir?
So glad to be here with you again. And, this is exciting.
We're excited to have you back. We had you a while back, and we enjoyed your interview so much, and many said they enjoyed seeing you. We thought we'd have you back. And this time, General Steve is wearing his dress uniform. It's a beautiful uniform.
Well, thank you. It's a uniform that has served the Army well and the chaplains well.
Right.
As, of course, we as chaplains wear the same uniform as the regular soldiers.
That's right. And I won't ask you to give a description of each one of your ribbons because that would take a little long for the show today.
It might take a little while. But.
Yes. But give us a little background, how the Lord led you. Of course, you're also a minister of the gospel, and you've been in the Army. But to give us a little background briefly on how the Lord led you into becoming an Army chaplain of all things today.
Well, I was very blessed to be born into a Christian family. We cannot choose our parents, of course.
That's right.
Because we're not of that age to do so. But I look back and I really feel that it was great because my dad became an Army chaplain and served in World War II and all, and the rest is history. I was, of course, enamored with their great life of faith, mother and dad's career as a man of God, as a pastor in uniform, as it were.
Yes.
Over all my life, and so I just thought that would be a wonderful career, but it had to be, of course, more than just a career. It had to be a call from
an actual calling. Yes. And so you answered that call and became a young lieutenant in the Army, and now you went to chaplain school, is that right?
Oh, yes. Yes. Back in the early 60s, halfway through seminary, and then I served, of course, in the reserves for, as it turned out to be, 30 years.
30 years, imagine.
And it was a marvelous time. I was able to serve as a chaplain, while my dad also served as a chaplain, finishing out his career.
I see. So both of you actually were toward the end of his career. You were already in and had become a chaplain and were commissioned. Right. It must have been a very proud moment for your dad, after all.
It really was. It was sort of like passing the baton, in the races. And Dad had run his laps, and then it was time for me to run my laps. And his last year on active duty and my first year on active duty as a chaplain overlapped.
My goodness.
And then I carried the baton for
another generation to carry on the tradition of being an Army chaplain. My goodness. And so when you became a chaplain, what was your first assignment as a young chaplain?
Well, I was actually commissioned, and I served a church for about a year and a half. Then the Vietnam War really built up back in 1966, 67. And so I was assigned to Fort Hood, Texas as my first tour. And I knew, of course, it would be a sort of a staging position and place, assignment to go eventually into Vietnam. And I was there, sure enough, only a year. and then they needed me in Vietnam.
Oh, I'm sure they did. And I imagine you have so many stories about the battlefield and being in Vietnam as a chaplain, and so many of the things. And
how many hours do you have?
Oh, my goodness, I can imagine. And the beautiful thing, though, about it is that God had you there, didn't he, Steve, right at the right time, because they needed a man of God on the scene, a chaplain. And I know you did a great work there.
You know, this was exactly the motivation that I had as a chaplain over there. I wasn't caught up in the politics or the strategy of war or all of that. I was a man of God in uniform, it's bringing man to God and God to man.
That's right.
Wherever our troops were, that's where they deserve to have the presence and reminders of the Lord being in their midst.
And that's one of the core values of a military chaplain, is to represent the presence of God. In their unit or squadron or wherever they may be, they are to represent that presence. And I know you did there.
And it's all soldiers. All chaplains go in under the sponsorship of a church or a denomination or an endorsing agency, but it's being a chaplain is something that is more broad than just serving a church.
Right.
As wonderful as that is, being a chaplain means that you serve everybody, whether they're believers or not. They deserve to have God in their presence.
That's very, very true. And in your work as a chaplain, what would you say is some of the, could you kind of tell our viewing audience today, what are kind of in general the role of the military chaplain especially?
Well, of course, the military chaplain wears the same uniform as the fighting force that he is positioned in or assigned to.
Right.
And we don't wear a distinctive garb that way, like a lot of ministers would wear a pulpit robe and so on and so forth.
Yes.
There are opportunities for that also to happen during the conduct of their services, but through the week and everything, we are just like one of the boys or one of the girls.
That's right.
And we're part of the same rank structure as well as we go up.
Yes.
And as we get a different or a higher rank, then we're at a different sphere of influence.
Oh, yes.
And the difference, though, with a chaplain is that you minister to all the troops, not just those that are subordinate or of lower rank than you.
Yes.
And actually, you're free and expected to minister up as well.
That's true.
So we have a sort of a privileged position in that sense.
Right.
That we minister not only to all faiths or those without a faith yet.
Right.
But also to all of the troops, male, female, and all.
And I imagine you've ministered to many of the wives of the troops too. If they've been deployed and you're still, let's say, on the base.
When, of course, we are assigned to posts where there are, of course, extended family situations there. And quite often on posts, if you may have in the middle of the night kind of disturbance that you'll enter in as a chaplain, as you would as a pastor.
Oh, I can imagine. There's all kinds of emergency things, and the chaplain has to be ready to go at all times, ready to be there.
There you go. On call really all the time.
And of course, I imagine over Vietnam, you did a lot of hospital visits too. Is that right?
Well, in Vietnam,
yes.
Actually, more than maybe many troops would be able to do. I was with the Combat Engineer Battalion in Vietnam, and when I got over there, we had some very serious fights, and a lot of our troops found themselves in the hospital.
I can imagine.
Queen Yon was the port city out on the coast,
right,
and in the middle of Vietnam, and that would be where the field hospitals were.
Wow.
So as often as I could get out there, it wasn't as often as I would like, maybe once a week or so.
Yeah, you would get out.
Probably isn't on an average.
It's like this program MASH. It's something like that. Those field hospitals and things like that. Very close.
Smaller and larger. A general hospital. That would be where they would have a general hospital where you would have more services.
Right.
But the field hospitals, they were something else.
There was something else, I can imagine. And then, of course, after the war, and I understand that when the war ended, you became or served for a while as a chaplain to the famous 101st Airborne.
Well,
would you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, actually, that came after my active duty time.
Okay.
And that's where I got the. I can talk about one badge.
Oh, please
here.
do.
You know, this is the air assault badge. This is the airborne badge, and I was in Germany when I was with the 1st Airborne Brigade, and we served, and yes, we jumped out a lot of airplanes.
I was going to say, the chaplain had to go to jump school.
Yeah, jump school. And I got this one first, and then this came along later. I wanted to be able to minister to all troops in all battle situations.
I like
With
that.
the airborne, of course, jumping out of airplanes, that's obvious. But then we had an air assault mission for helicopters that came in, and then there would be rappelling out of choppers.
Oh my, you did all of that as well,
training.
Chaplain Steve.
So I wanted to be sure if I got on the airplane, I could either jump out of it or rappel out of it or land with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
very good. Well, you know, the men must have highly respected you, especially as an airborne person, that you were the chaplain, and yet you went through the same training as the regular troops.
Yeah.
That's very commendable.
Sometimes they put officers and chaplains through if you're pardon the expression here in Southern California, a Hollywood course.
Oh, yes.
Where they have a modified, tailored course, and sort of like they sort of groom you and push you through and so forth like that.
I see.
And I learned of that, and I says, no, I want to do whatever the troops are doing, because as a chaplain,
yes,
I would never live it down if I got my wings the easy way or something like that.
No, you earned them, I know. And knowing you, I know that you did everything that should be done to receive what you received.
Well, it wasn't easy.
30 years in the
doable.
Army, you know, that's great. And those ribbons speak for themselves. They speak volumes of your service record.
Well, they're kind of a picture
right.
of where you've been.
And for those that are watching today that perhaps you have a military background, I know you can really appreciate a lot of things Chaplain Steve's saying here today. And you were one of the very few chaplains that attended the War College. Would you tell us about that? Because that's very unusual for a chaplain.
I think there were 7 chaplains that had gone through the War College. When I went through, I was at number 8.
You were number 8.
And I was able to do it through a very fine recommendation from my 2-star general, my boss. And in fact, he suggested it, and he says, let's make it happen. And it did, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I was there with all of those that are being groomed to become generals.
I understand that if you want to be a general,
most of the generals
yes.
In the military and in the different branches, and then of course you become a general, came through the War College.
Oh, yes.
So I wanted that experience too. Also, it was something that my dad in his career before me didn't have an opportunity to do.
I see.
And so although I couldn't equal a lot of the things Dad did, because times and wars and positions
different
changed
situations.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I was able to do that, and it was a terrific.
He must have been very proud of you, as your unit was, to be the 8th chaplain in the history of the United States Army to be at War College, which is, of course, a prerequisite to be even considered to be a general officer. Right. I think that's marvelous.
It certainly helps.
Oh, yeah, that's what I understand. The guys have told me how important that is if you want to be a general one day. And, of course, I'm very glad the Lord put you in that situation, and you came through beautifully. And I know your dad has been a great source of inspiration. Tell us a little bit about your dad's career, too, as well as your own.
Well, I'm always ready to talk about my dad's career.
Oh, I know he was wonderful.
Ahead of my own, because he was my mentor. He was the one that was the pathfinder and paved the way. And when I identified it and I saw that I could do it, at least to my extent, and it didn't hurt to be of the same genes as my dad too. That helped a little bit too. Some of the good qualities he has and in me and so on. And so we were able to put that together, and of course that nothing pleases a dad more than to have his son follow in his footsteps.
Oh, I can imagine. Yes.
But Dad never pushed it that way, and he wanted me to really receive the direct call, in addition to his support, and which did happen. But I really appreciated what all my dad was able to accomplish.
Well, he accomplished so many things. I understand that in Europe. Would you tell us a little bit about? I understand he was the head chaplain for the U.S. Army in Europe. Is that right?
One of Dad's great assignments was the US Army Europe Chaplain.
Right.
In Heidelberg, Germany. And back in that time, I was 14 years old and a freshman in high school. And he was the top Army chaplain in Vietnam, and it became the time is back in 1953, 54, 55, and that he was in charge of all the chaplains over there when actually Billy Graham was. I don't think I mentioned that last time.
No, I don't think so. For our viewing audience, I would like you to share that story, because that is a wonderful story about this young evangelist that was to hold his first crusades over in Europe, and who helped him to do that. Would you share about it?
We just happened to be over there at the right time, and Dad being the leader, Billy Graham's team, Grady Wilson, and George Beverly Shea and Cliff Barrows.
Oh my!
One of them called him up one day in Heidelberg from the States and said, Billy Graham is interested in doing his first continental European mission, and would you mind sponsoring him? And of course, Dad says, well, I don't need to pray about that one, of course. And so Dad did sponsor them over there. And the Grahams actually stayed in our home the first 3 nights.
Oh, my goodness.
They're coming over there. And that was a terrific time.
You guys must have been very excited.
We got Dad arranged for a German general's train. You realize the era there, and it was still under the occupation time.
Oh, yes.
And he got a German general's train and chartered it, and we wound up, after a week of preparation, we had a week of crusades. They weren't a single place for a week. They were one-night stands.
Oh, my goodness.
And we got on this train from Berlin and had an event there, and then down the way throughout Germany, Frankfurt, Mannheim, Stuttgart, and a couple other places.
Sounds like a whirlwind evangelistic crusade that time.
And I remember sitting in the dining car of this train, listening to the World Series. It was during that time, and piped in from the States.
Oh, man.
Which impressed everybody. And
now, your dad...
I caddied for Billy Graham on the golf course.
You did. You were the caddy. Well, that was good. I understand that your dad and Billy Graham had become great personal friends as a result of those meetings. Would you share that a little bit about that today?
They kept up with each other. And Billy Graham, I think it was thought of for many years, they had Parkinson's. Dad, in his later part of his life, 2 years before he died, he got Parkinson's. And during that time, Billy Graham and Dad corresponded, and Billy Graham would say, well, I'm on this medication, what are you on, Ed? And then back and forth like that.
Yeah, they were friends, personal
friends. But at Christmas time especially, they would keep in touch with.
Isn't that wonderful? That became a lifelong friendship, and what a marvelous person to have as a friend, Billy Graham, of course.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I know that as a chaplain, there's a famous story that maybe our viewing audience would like to know of the history of a little bit of the history of the chaplaincy. There's a famous an award called the Four Chaplains Award. Very significant. Would you share with our audience today something about that?
Many of you may know about the story in World War II, and I brought this book along because it had the date that I wanted to be sure to remember of the story of the episode that happened. February the 2nd, 1943, the American transport ship Dorchester was streaming through the icy North Atlantic just off the coast of Greenland. The 902 soldiers she carried were tense. Everyone knew where they were, the dreaded Torpedo Junction, in quotes, where 100 Allied merchant and marine ships a month were being sunk by torpedoes from the German submarines. And then the story goes on to say on this particular occasion, the Dorchester, knowing that there was danger in the area, actually did get hit by the German U-boats and was sunk. And all the ship went down, and those there weren't enough life vests and lifeboats for everyone. 4 chaplains were on board. They had their life vests, and they says, let's get together. Here's 4 lives we can save. And they each of them gave their own life jackets to 4 people who did all survive as a result. And they went down the ship and they held hands. and they sang hymns. And the story goes where those in the lifeboats and everything were encouraged by those chaplains and what they did.
Yes.
Well, that's a terrific story.
It is.
In and of itself. But what makes me also choke up is when they formalized this after the war and came up, I think it's the Jewish Society, B'nai B'rith, I think.
Yes.
Formed an annual award, and they chose a chaplain, have each year chosen a chaplain
yes.
to receive the annual award of the Four Chaplains Award.
Yes.
My dad was the first one.
Your dad was the first one
to
receive the award, the Four Chaplains Award.
Yeah. And of course,
what
it was
a tremendous
great pride for the family.
Oh, it must have been. I understand there's a picture of that hangs in the Pentagon today.
Yeah, I think that's
of that great event, and they were Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish.
Yes.
Isn't that wonderful?
That's right.
And what a great legacy that chaplains have to live and to follow today as an inspiration of these men. Well, they gave their lives in that manner.
That's exemplary of what chaplains do.
That's what they do.
They live lives of sacrifice and ready to be there for them. Like the scripture says, greater love has no man than this, that a man lays down his life for his friend.
Yes.
The words of Jesus, of course.
I think a lot of us have learned a lot and are learning a lot today about chaplaincy and the importance of it. And today you are now retired from the regular Army after 30 years, and now you're the second in command. And I'd like you to share about the United States Volunteers Joint Services Command. And you're the second in command.
Well, I'm currently serving as the Chief of Staff.
Chief of Staff.
I have been the Chief of Chaplains.
Yes.
And for a time, I said that I would be willing to fill in because our great Chief of Staff retired. Mm-hmm. And until they find a Chief of Staff, I'll be the Chief of Staff for the U.S. Volunteers Joint Services Command, national.
Yes.
And we do final military honors for our veterans.
Yes.
That's our
well, I'm privileged to be one of the chaplains in the USV, and I'm honored to work along with you and doing the programs, as we say, boots on graves over, especially at Riverside National Cemetery, which now is becoming the Arlington of the West, I understand.
Yes, that's right.
And a lot of people don't know.
We actually do twice as many services as Arlington.
My goodness, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! And if for any young ministers of the gospel watching the program today, if they're feeling a direction toward military chaplaincy, would you like to look into the camera there and just for a minute and share what you think?
Sure. Well, I can say that one of the great joys I had was keeping my uniform and myself in fair shape so that I could wear it. Flexible, so if the Lord would need me in anything after this time of retirement, many years ago, and it came to be the Lord's providence that this fine gentleman, as of course the president of Promise University, Christian University, it worked out that I was tapped on the shoulder to organize and start up a school of chaplaincy.
Yes.
Not just military, but for any form of chaplaincy, because I also am credentialed in hospital chaplaincy.
Yes.
So we started the school about 3.5 years ago, and it's going on now. In fact, I just finished a group last week, and many of them become chaplains alongside of whatever ministry they have in the U.S. Volunteers. Some of them go into active duty.
Some have done that.
And we've had several to do that. I have a couple now that are working with getting into the National Guard.
Well, we're so thrilled that, Brother Steve, that you are also the director of our chaplaincy school at Promise Christian University. I know that we have been blessed today by having you with us, and the Lord made a way for you to be promoted to Brigadier General and Chief of Staff now, as well as having been Chief of the Chaplain's Service, and also Director of the Chaplaincy Program at Promise. And we're just delighted. We're honored to know you and honored to know men like you that are serving our nation and serving the Lord within the nation in uniform. As you say, a pastor in uniform. And we're just thrilled and delighted. I want to thank you for being on the program today and for sharing these wonderful things. I think it's been a learning experience for many of us that have been viewing this program today. And we'll continue to pray for you and your great success and your continuation serving the Lord in uniform and serving the people. Again, it's an honor to have you, sir. We're so glad and delighted to have guests like this. Dudley, I'm so thrilled today about what the Lord has done in the life of our guest, Brigadier General and Chaplain Steve Kirtley. So again, I think it's just been wonderful today.
Well, thanks, Mike. I really liked what our guest had to say today. I appreciated it. And did you? I can't tell you who we're going to have on next week, but you'll sure want to tune in. Remember, if you want to contact us, just phone 1-888-723-6233 or email us at mypcu@aol.com. So what do you have to get done today, to get done this week? Don't put it off until tomorrow. Do it now. And you'll be surprised at how much you'll accomplish. See you next week, God willing. Shalom.
Career has been very distinctive.